Okay, so I hit screen share first, right? Share
Yes.
screen. Okay, and then
I
we
see
are
it.
going to, yeah. All right, well, can't get this toolbar out of the way. Sorry, I just relied on my ability to quickly figure out technology rather than actually try this out for the first time. Okay, here we go.
There it is.
Can you? All right.
Yeah.
So what my talk is meant to go over is just some of the basics of what is, oh, sorry, what is anxiety, what is depression, what is suicidality, what does that have to do with it, how does substance abuse and addiction come in, interpersonal violence, what are some resources, and how do all of these things relate to COVID-19. So I think everybody's kind of initial reaction was something like this, where you just have, like William was saying, you're getting news bombed and you don't know what to do but for hoard a bunch of Lysol and toilet paper, apparently. And there are some specific things to the way that we've reacted to COVID-19 that we need to attend to if we're going to understand and treat mental health issues related to these stressors. So a stressor, just as a basic definition, it's any sort of external event or situation that places a physical or psychological demand on a person. And stress is actually the internal psychological state to a stressor. So one has stress in reaction to a stressor, if that makes sense. And so major sources of stress typically are can be things like major life events, catastrophes, but more often than not, it's daily hassles like this guy has going on, conflict, frustration. These are some of the leading causes of stress that were recorded prior to COVID-19. As you can see, these are things that most of us might be stressed about. And short-term stress can be actually beneficial. It can motivate you to work harder and produce better work. But long-term, we know that it can be deadly. And looking at anxiety disorders, we know that anxiety is a state of tension, worry. There's physiological reactivity, things like heightened heartbeat, things like increased increased heartbeat and blood pressure, having a harder time to breathe. Those sorts of things react in our body when we feel a state of anxiety. And anxiety disorders often involve an unfounded fear, a sense of fear that comes seemingly from nowhere. Some people wake up out of the middle of the night sleeping in a state of anxiety. It produces significant distress and it interferes with their ability to do their day-to-day functions. And daily environmental stress can produce anxiety. There are some people that might have more vulnerabilities to this psychologically, biologically, genetically. We know factors in the environment like poverty, traumatic events, limited social support, all of those things can influence how anxiety is expressed. And we know that what's going on in the larger culture and society around us has something to do with all of this. So if you look at just some of these examples here, during the recession that began in 2008, US suicides increased by about 1,500 in that 2-year period. You have in European countries with the greatest economic challenges, a suicide rate that increased by more than 60%. So we know that things like this can affect us. And we know certainly in some situations like combat, assault, violent crime, natural disasters, which we might consider what's going on now, work-related accidents can even progress to the state of post-traumatic stress disorder. Adjustment disorders are when we have a difficulty adjusting to a specific life stressor. So it's an exposure to something that's identifiable, but we have a seemingly out of proportion response of stress to it. And it persists for a decent period of time, longer than you would expect. If you look at some of the Pew research, you can see that according to what we've done here, nearly 1 in 5 Americans say they've had a physical reaction when thinking about the outbreak. So feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge, having trouble sleeping, feeling depressed, lonely, those sorts of things have been documented. And we know that the causes of mental health disorders are not just something in your genes, it's not just the way you think, it's not just what's going on around you, it's sort of all of those things. And so this is the overall kind of prevalence of anxiety disorders. You can see that anxiety disorders are a pretty significant percentage of mental health disorders experienced by Americans 18 or older in the past 12 months in this chart. And one thing that's related to this and could be more specific to COVID as well are phobias and social anxiety. So many people have phobias around germs, for instance, and cleanliness. Or many people have agoraphobia, where they don't want to be around crowds and people, they don't want to leave the house. So those sorts of things might be exacerbated. But generalized anxiety disorder is just an excessive worry, a kind of constant state of worry with no identifiable cause. It lasts for at least 6 months. That would be a clinical definition. Panic disorder would be something like recurrent and abrupt experiences of intense fear, physical symptoms. The person might feel like they're dying. If you've had a panic attack, I'm sorry, it's horrible to experience, and it does feel like you're dying. You feel this sense of doom. So that is something that can be related as well. Phobias, as I mentioned, were strong, persistent fears of objects, situations that is out of proportion with what it should be. It affects almost 10% of the population, and it tends to be more common in women. Obsessive compulsive disorder, as I mentioned, is when somebody has a recurrent or a persistent or intrusive thought. That's what we call the obsession. And they have a behavior that tends to be repetitive, that they perform in response to that thought. That's the compulsive aspect. So the thought's the obsession, the behavior is the compulsion. And in this situation, it might be something like, the obsession is germs. Where are germs? Where's COVID-19? Am I going to be infected? The compulsion might be, I'm going to wash my hands 100 times in a row until they bleed. So depressive disorders might also relate here, where extreme kind of lengths of anxiety can throw people into a depressed mood where they have a loss of interest or pleasure in what they usually experience as pleasurable. That's called anhedonia. They have changes in sleep patterns, appetite. They might not want to function as they typically do. They have a loss of energy. And we know that there is online therapy that people are making use of, which is great. And I'm sure some of the others will speak to as well. Suicide relates to this because obviously one of the worst outcomes, or the worst outcome of experiencing depression or anxiety, is going to be suicide. So we know that suicide occurs more in males than females. We see that there are different rates according to race. You can look at suicide at any number of factors like this, but what I wanted to focus on was just some resources about how you can address suicidal ideation. So the link that you see here at the bottom of this page is something that you can go to, and I assume we'll make this presentation available as a file, about how to talk to somebody who's lost somebody due to suicide, for instance. They have other scripts to help you. Some risk factors and protective factors. So risk factors being things like relational conflicts, social isolation, unemployment, um, bereavement, things like what we might be experiencing now. Those might be risk factors, but protective factors are going to be family, community support, uh, willingness to talk about problems, willingness to resolve conflict. So I'm going to go over just some suicide warning signs, but there are some graphics that you can download at this specific URL as well. So this is just a few. It might be hard for you to see depending on how big your screen is, but this would be like talk that the person is a burden to others, or perhaps they feel trapped. Perhaps they are anxious and depressed. Perhaps they're withdrawing from others. They're using alcohol and drugs. They're isolating more from friends and friends, partially because we have to. There might not be a regulated sleeping pattern or eating pattern. All of these things might point to somebody experiencing depression or suicidal ideation. There's also a conversation guide about what to talk about, do's and don'ts with mental health, if you go to this link here. And the suicide prevention hotline is a 24/7, 365 number. There's always somebody there. They can translate in any language. They have a chat line as well, and they also can text. There's a crisis text line that I'm sure many of you know of. You text home to 741-741. It's confidential, it's free, and it's something that a lot of people can use, especially teenagers or people who don't want to have others in the household hear what they're speaking about. Now, substance abuse and addiction play in, as substance abuse is just a harmful use of drugs and alcohol. Addiction is when there's compulsive drug-seeking behavior. There's withdrawal symptoms when it's discontinued. It can be prescription medications, legal substances, or illegal substances. But psychological stress and emotional symptoms can be a major motive for substance use. So this is what we call dual diagnosis. Dual diagnosis is when somebody experiences a mental health disorder, but they're also experiencing a substance abuse disorder at the same time. So the treatment becomes much more complex. So treatment would be things like self-help groups, mental health clinics, inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, etc. And lastly, what I wanted to talk about was domestic violence. So domestic violence can include violent, abusive behavior between an intimate partner, children, somebody who is an elderly member of the family. There are many cases of domestic violence even here in Henderson County. So what happens when you're kind of stuck in a household with somebody who's abusive? So it's important to understand that domestic violence is about power and control. I'll make this available to you, but what it's called is the power and control wheel, and it shows all of the different ways that an abuser kind of controls their victim. And you can see that some of these might play in perfectly for the COVID-19 situation. So some examples would be physical abuse, causing injury, asserting control, shoving, hitting, strangling, sexual abuse, forcing unwanted sexual contact, for instance, or tampering with the person's contraceptives, verbal or emotional abuse, screaming, threats, insults, name calling, things like that. Stalking, monitoring the person, looking through their communications, sometimes looking at the mileage on their car. Financial abuse would be taking over all of the finances, sometimes ruining somebody's credit by using their cards, etc., not letting them earn money, and digital abuse by stalking the person or going through their information online, social media, as a means of tracking them. And we know that the effects on victims can include things like PTSD, depression, anxiety, panic disorders, and poor self-esteem. And for children as well, there tends to be outcomes of learning difficulties later on, attachment problems, conduct disorders, and mental health disorders. So some of the reasons why people don't leave domestic violence situations are very complex. I'll leave this here for you to kind of dig into a little bit later since I'm going over time a bit. But some barriers to reporting this already exist, right? There's a fear that you're not going to be believed. There's a fear that if the abuser's taken to jail, then you're not going to have income in the household, right? How is that compounded now with COVID-19 when you're scared to call the cops because your abuser will be taken away to a jail that's potentially teeming with COVID-19, right? So some remedies for this are to contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline. This is what some of their advocates have been hearing from survivors through their chat line. So a chatter said the abuser was using COVID-19 as a scare tactic so they wouldn't visit family, for instance. And how COVID-19 could uniquely impact intimate partner violence. An abusive partner might withhold necessary items, hand sanitizer, disinfectants, withhold insurance cards, etc. There's a few more on here if you'd like to take a look. But one of the biggest things that in this situation, one wants to know about is safety planning. So there's a hotline here, that's the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE. You can also call 211, which is kind of like 411, but for social services in your area, any organization they can look up. The crisis text line, as I mentioned, and then chat available at thehotline.org. And they can help you with safety planning, things like what to pack if you're planning to escape a domestic violence situation, as you see here on the right. So that's all I have. I'm sorry I've gone over time. And I will give it back to Beth to introduce the next speaker.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, unmute everyone right now.
That was really good. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Very good.
And then Kristen is gonna talk to us, and let me get your presentation up, Kristen.
Thank you.
Okay. There we go.
Hello, everybody. So I wanted to talk about some specific strategies to reduce anxiety during the pandemic. If you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to recap a little bit of what Rachel just said very briefly. Some of the signs that you guys may be experiencing right now, I know I'm experiencing a lot of these signs, are physical symptoms like muscle tension, jitteriness, you know, that leg shaking that never stops, fatigue. I know, like in my house, we're having a lot of, like, we're just tired even though we're not doing anything or going anywhere. Difficulty sleeping, so that could be due to insomnia and just having a hard time sleeping. It can be due to caffeine consumption. And it can be due to having a routine change, not having a bedtime, not having a set time to wake up in the morning. Turning to food like chocolate or carbs or alcohol or other drugs to kind of self-medicate some of those feelings. I know there's been a lot of talk online and in the news about alcohol sales during this pandemic. Rumination, this is when you are kind of obsessing about an idea, like you're thinking about it over and over. You can't get the thought out of your head. I know in my house, what I'm seeing a lot with my kids is the, when is this gonna end? The uncertainty, like this can't last through my birthday. That's what my almost 16-year-old says. What if it lasts through fall when school starts? What if it's, you know, next Christmas, we're still dealing with this kind of stuff. Over focusing on the news and social media, I know I have found myself kind of getting sucked into the news when I see it online, or when like my grandfather watches the news a lot. So when I see it on there and hearing a lot of the kind of scary stuff that they're talking about on the news. And then the last sign is the emotional lability. This is those mood swings. This is when you're crying for no reason to, you know, I watched Love is Blind this weekend and I was crying to every episode. This is when you might kind of find yourself getting crankier or more angry with the people in your household. So these are all signs that may be going on for you that also may be signs of anxiety. Next slide, please. Thank you. So some cognitive strategies to reduce your anxiety. You know, the first one is going to be don't catastrophize. Don't automatically go to the absolute worst case scenario. You know, if you get infected with COVID-19, you're going to die, or your family members are going to die. Or if you, you know, touch your face when you're at the grocery store, then that's all of a sudden, oh God, what did I just do? Challenging those anxious thoughts as they happen. So I am a big user of this strategy for my own anxiety, where I will think, you know, one of those anxious thoughts, and then I'll immediately challenge it in my head. So if I think, you know, this is never going to end. Okay, this is going to end. There will be a time when this gets under control. This is not going to last forever. I'm also a big proponent of, you know, worse things have happened. So the fact that I'm comfortable in my house with plenty of food, plenty of toilet paper, Netflix, Wi-Fi, my kids, you know, things could be much worse. So for me, that makes me feel better because that challenges that anxious thought. Mindfulness is really helpful. This idea of noticing your thoughts, but not judging them. You know, it's not the thoughts themselves that cause anxiety. It's all of those judgments that we place on the thought. So if you have the thought of, you know, this pandemic is never going to end, then it's, well, what happens to holidays? You know, oh, my kids aren't getting their graduation, or our students aren't getting their graduation, or prom being canceled and things like that. And then the last thing that's a, you know, I put it up here as a cognitive strategy. It's really using grounding. And this is just a way to distract yourself from that anxiety. So there's different ways you can do it. You can use your body. So focusing on feeling your feet kind of pressed into the ground, using music, using physical activity. You can focus on your 5 senses. So this might be something like having a familiar smell that you enjoy, or I have a weighted blanket. Actually, all of us have weighted blankets in my household. And we will get under our weighted blankets when we're feeling particularly anxious because that feeling of pressure. Self-soothing might be things like taking a bath or a shower. It might be using some sort of specific object. My youngest daughter has an anxiety stone that she'll rub when she's feeling very anxious. It might be, you know, making a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. Maybe caffeine's not so great when you're feeling anxious, but, you know, herbal tea or decaffeinated coffee. Observation is looking at things in detail. So, for example, I have some flowers behind my computer from outside from the garden. So looking at the flowers and really noticing the detail of the color, the detail of, you know, the texture of the flowers. There's one grounding technique with observation that talks about eating. So eating, particularly therapists will talk about eating a raisin and feeling that texture of the raisin and really like focusing on the feel of that texture in your mouth. Breathing, obviously we all know breathing is important. Breathing from our belly, not those shallow breaths from our chest. We'll talk about things like breathing in for 4, holding it for 7, and breathing out for 8 to really kind of slow that breathing process down, make sure you're getting that deep breath. And then distraction might be helpful. So distraction is things like, you know, counting by 5 or counting by 9, or thinking of a category and coming up with as many objects in that category, something to distract your brain from that anxious thought. Next slide, please. And then I wanted to put some self-care strategies up here. You know, people talk about self-care a lot. It's a huge buzzword for the last like 10 years or so. And I often hear people talk about it as if it's some big thing, like getting a pedicure, or that's a self-care strategy, or, going on a vacation as a self-care strategy, but it's not necessarily big things. It's very little things that you do on a regular basis. So the first thing that I think is super important during all of this quarantine stuff is a schedule and a routine. It's so tempting to just sleep until we wake up. But what happens is then that next night you can't fall asleep. So the next day you sleep later. And then all of a sudden you find out that your schedule's reversed and you're up all night like a vampire and you're sleeping all day. So I still, get up to an alarm during the week. It's not a 5 a.m. alarm, but it is still a morning alarm. I am still, I have like showered and done my hair and my makeup and gotten dressed in like a dress or jeans every day of quarantine, because otherwise I feel like a slug. And I feel like I can't get anything accomplished because I'm just being lazy. So for me, keeping that, even if nobody's going to see me that day, having my hair done and having my makeup done makes me feel calm and makes me feel normal. Nutrition is important. We are very tempted to look to carbs when we're stressed out because carbs cause that release of serotonin in our brain, and serotonin is that chemical that makes us feel happy and feel good. But then we have that cycle where we might feel a sugar crash later. We might feel like we're, outgrowing our pants, and then we start getting upset and down on ourselves about that. So making sure that you're getting vegetables, you're getting those kind of whatever your nutrition is. And of course, I would, not recommend a specific type of diet like keto or vegan or something like that. It's whatever works for you that makes you feel your healthiest and your most effective. Moving your body and getting outside, I think both of those are kind of tied together. We're spending a lot of time sitting down. I know I went from teaching 5 seated classes to sitting at my computer like 9 hours a day because that's the only way I can keep up. So making sure, even if it's just for me, like walking through my house and checking on my kids or walking outside to the garden or something, doing something where I'm moving my body, I'm getting that exercise, I'm getting that oxygenated blood flowing through my body, and also getting outdoors where you can have that sun. Now, I know some places may be safer or not as safe for getting outdoors. So of course, doing it in a way that is safe for you, that you feel comfortable with, but really just getting that fresh air and sun exposure. Making time for social support. So this is the time for social distancing, and particularly for those of us who are single, social distancing is a little scary because we don't have that significant other partner. And for people who are living alone, that can be particularly anxiety producing. But we have FaceTime, we have Skype, we have Zoom, we have, all of these different things that they did not have during the Spanish flu pandemic 100 years ago. So we can really stay in touch. We can schedule Zoom happy hours, and we can watch a movie on Netflix with our friends watching it at the same time, and really make that effort to get that social support, even if you're not feeling it. So I'm one of those people who I'm very introverted, and I tend to pull in when I get stressed out. And so like my mom will specifically text me more often when she sees I'm not posting on Facebook or texting her, and she'll be like, what's going on? Be like, you're not active on Facebook. What's going on? How are you feeling? So making sure that you really make that effort to reach out, even if you're not feeling it. And then my last thing up here is just acknowledge that this is hard and this is stressful, but it's hard and stressful for it's hard and stressful for everybody in the world. This is something that is a global event that we're all going through. And so, it's not just you stuck in your house, not able to be around other people, that this is something that's being experienced, that we're all in together. And because of that, we're seeing, I watched Phantom of the Opera the other weekend that was put online. People, Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood had a concert a couple days ago. We're getting all of those celebrities and other people doing things that we can all access because of the fact that we are all in this together. Next slide, please. And then this is just some resources that I was just doing some searching around on the web and found these to be particularly helpful. And so the links are there. One is from the CDC. We have the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, and then the American Psychological Association. And definitely, the numbers that Rachel posted earlier are so important. If you need to reach out to somebody, there's lots of opportunities right now through the crisis hotlines, through telehealth. Lots of therapists have gotten approval through insurance to do telehealth. So these are all going to be things that if you feel like your anxiety is getting out of control, then these are good resources for you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's see what we have here. Okay, I think everybody's, well, I tried to unmute at this moment. So next we have Christina, and I don't know if you need to share the screen, but you certainly can do that if you need to.
No, that's fine. I don't need to share the screen. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Hi. My name is Cristina Solis. I am Paulina Solis' sister. I currently live in Honduras, and I'm a college student. And I just wanted to share with you some of my experience with anxiety and depression. So last year, I was diagnosed with anxiety and PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, due to some events that I went through in my childhood and early teen years. For a long time, I struggled with anxiety since I was like 13, 14. I struggled with anxiety. I had countless panic attacks where I had to go to the hospital because I couldn't control myself. And for a long time, I wouldn't say anything. I would just say, oh yes, I feel anxious, but I wouldn't tell my parents or my family or my friends my thoughts or what scared me. And so for years, I had to endure all of that by myself, like all in my head, scary thoughts. I had to go through that myself, and that led to a lot of panic attacks, a lot of hospital visits, a lot of moments where I felt really depressed, and probably I didn't know I was going through it because I never talked about it. But last year, I went to the States to live with my sister. She lives in Florida, and I went to stay with her. And after 2 months, I entered a crisis, which is one of my major crises I've had with anxiety. It was a whole week of I couldn't stand up from the bed. I couldn't take care of the baby. I was babysitting my niece, and I couldn't do that because I felt helpless. I would go to an aunt's house, and I would just go to a bathroom and cry because I felt so sad, and I felt that I was gonna die. And I had this thing in my chest that was always there, and I couldn't control it. I remember that I used to call my mom, and I would tell her, Mom, please, you need to help me because I can't control it. It's like, I don't know what's happening. I feel that I'm going to die. And then on Wednesday that week, I couldn't sleep. It had been sleepless nights for the whole week. But that day in particular, it was awful. Like, I couldn't bear anymore. So I went to my sister and I told her, I can't do this anymore. I don't know what's happening. And she took me to a hospital. And one of the symptoms of anxiety is that your arm starts to get numb, and that's also a heart attack symptom. So my sister got scared, my mom got scared. We went to the hospital. They made all these tests. They made all these checkups, and the doctor said it was nothing. My heart was okay. Everything was okay. So he told me it's just anxiety. He gave me some pills. I went back home. But later that week, I decided that I really needed to come back home, needed to be with my parents. So I came back to Honduras. It was a huge decision. I really wanted to study in the States, but because of my anxiety and because I needed help, I decided to come back to Honduras, study here, and that's what I did. I came back. I went to the psychiatrist. I went to the psychologist. The psychiatrist then told me that I had PTSD and anxiety. And that was just at first, the first part when they tell you what you have, and then everything went down again, because you go through that diagnosis and understanding what you have. And after I went over my anxiety, the doctor told me, you're going through depression now. That's why you sleep a lot. That's why you don't have that much energy. And that was even harder for me because I was aware of my depression and I didn't want to be in it. And when I was sleeping a lot, I couldn't control it. My body was just tired. So I felt even more, I felt worse because I thought, this is not me. I don't want to be this person that is sad all the time, that doesn't have energy, that is sleeping all the time. So that part was hard. But after that, with medications and a lot of therapy, I went through it. Today, I have controlled my anxiety so much. I never thought that I would be here where I am today, where I have the capacity to do everything that once I was fearful of, of enduring everything, public situations, or, being alone for a long time, scary situations, being able to go through them. I think that um, being able to express myself, tell my family, have friends that supported me, and looking for professional help helped me a lot. I think that for me and for a lot of people, it's crucial, sharing your experience, sharing your thoughts, sharing your feelings, and having someone else tell you that it's gonna be okay. It's a peaceful thing, that has helped me a lot, especially in these times with COVID-19. There were days where I felt like this was never going to be over. Where, what if I don't see my family again? What if I don't see my friends again? What if this is the new normal? And, I exteriorized all those things, all those thoughts with my friends, with my family, and that helped me a lot. That made me realize that my mind was tricking me to believe all that stuff, that was not true, that I was better than that, and that I could overcome that. So my life has definitely changed a lot since I decided to speak up about my mental health, since I decided to set it as a priority. So my advice would be that don't be scared to say how you feel, to say what you think. Many times we are scared that people are going to think, oh, you're crazy, or that's not true, that's like so irrational. But sometimes those irrational thoughts are not irrational for people. One of my main fears is death. A lot of people with anxiety fear death, and a lot of people think that that's irrational. Everyone's gonna go through it, but for me, that's a huge factor of my anxiety. Feeling that I'm gonna die constantly is something that I think about every day. And before expressing myself, when I just kept it for me, it was horrible. I thought about death every second. I had a lot of anxiety because of it, but now that I can express it and that I can tell someone, oh, I'm scared, I'm feeling bad, like I think I'm gonna die, and they tell me, no, you're fine, you're okay, I can overcome it. Having someone help is not bad. Having someone there for you is not bad. So you don't have to do this alone. Express yourselves, express your feelings. People are gonna think what they're gonna think, but if you have family, friends that love you, they will understand you, and they won't judge or criticize you. They will embrace you, and they will help you acknowledge that those thoughts that are in your mind, they can be overcome, and that you can pull through it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm gonna unmute everyone, or try to. I don't know. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Y'all can unmute yourselves if it doesn't work. And so now is the question and answer time. If anybody has questions that they want to ask, we certainly have some experts on the call with us, on the meeting with us. I don't know what you call it, on the Zoom with us. And so if anybody has questions or comments about stuff, feel free. No?
Nope.
Come on. Somebody has questions.
I just saw the name Megan Basker.
Yeah, Megan Baskerville. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's because she's unmuted and she made a noise, and so it like highlights to people
Sorry.
when that happens. It's okay.
Okay. I'd like to ask a question to Christina. Christina, thanks for sharing your story. That must have been particularly anxiety ridden, especially as you were so far from your family. Did you feel that when you were in the States that you had any sort of support system built, or had you not been there long enough, or had you not made very many connections, or was this just irrational fears that you were having? Were there people you could turn to?
Yes, I was living with my sister and her husband, so they were my support system. I think that definitely they were just irrational fears, about death and everything, that my mind just made it even bigger than maybe they should have been. But yes, I had my sister. She had never dealt with someone with anxiety at that level, but she really helped me cope. She researched a lot and she looked for methods to help me, and she was there for me. So I had her as my backup system.
That's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah, I would like to say, Christine, I loved hearing your story. It was really uplifting. I do also have PTSD. I was in the Army, deployed 3 times, so I got it from there. I think what's really great is that you were able to get help, and that is so important because, due to socioeconomic factors, there are a lot of people out there who are not able to get the help they need. And I'm not talking about just soldiers, but everybody. And I think that's something that really needs to be talked about. Is just the lack of support for people who just really don't understand mental illness. And I'll tell you this, and this is not a burn on anybody, but I suffer too from PTSD. I have general anxiety, and I'm normally in a major depression. And I have depression as well. And my wife doesn't understand it. She's there for me and she loves me and she supports me, but she doesn't understand the feelings that I go through as far as my anxiety, as far as my depression. Like I'll wake up one day and I'll just say, hey, I'm not myself today. Whatever the pills I'm taking or my therapy. And, sometimes she'll, but before she would just say, oh, grow up or, just get through it. But she kind of gets a little bit of a better understanding now that it's not just a matter of growing up. It's a matter of dealing with problems that you have that are inside your head that just can't be just put out. It's not like it's not like a disease where you can get a shot and you're okay. It's something that's just never going to go away. It's something you have to deal with every day. So I'm really glad that you're able to do that, because that says a lot about you. It really does, because I know I've had a lot of friends who have gone through stuff, and they were not able to do as well as you are. Especially, you said you were going back to school, so that is an amazing achievement. And I really want you to understand what a major achievement that is for you to deal with all that and to be able to go back to school. So that is really, really great.
Thank you. Thank you.
For the professors online, what do you know? Can you address what kind of support is out there through your colleges for your students? Like, we have students online from different colleges, but who would they contact at their school, or do they need to contact anybody at their school? Should they use outside resources if they're having issues right now?
Well, at ECPI, where I teach, we have what's called eConnect. And eConnect is an all-encompassing force. It not just deals with mental health, but financial health. Anything like if a student is broke, they don't have any money, they need to talk to somebody. eConnect is something that's open 24 hours. It's almost like a 24-hour hotline for our students. It's free of charge, and they do anything from suicidal talk and mental problems to help with finances. So it's called eConnect. You can either do it online or you can do it on the phone, and it is free. So that's part of what our school at ECPI does.
Okay, that's great.
Mhm.
At Craven, we have a student coordinator who puts out a newsletter every month. And she has, because we're not here, listed a lot of community resources for the students. And then our HR department has done the same thing for faculty and staff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Also in South Carolina, where I live, in every county, we have a Department of Mental Health, which I used to work for. And they will basically take anybody with or without insurance. They just take what you can pay. So if they do need mental health, and a lot of people don't have proper insurance or the money for that, you can go to any one of those departments and make an appointment, and they will see you even if you don't have insurance. So
Okay.
that's something we can send them. And then we also have a lot of vets in our school as well, or a lot of veterans. So we have a veteran support group that started in our school by Dr. Goodwin. So it's part of the Vets Club. So they get together, and not only do they talk about issues, but they go out and help other people. I think last month they actually worked with Habitat for Humanity.
Okay.
So we have a lot of our student organizations deal with mental health, and we have the eConnect, and also myself, and then we have a few other psychology professors. We do get students that come and talk to us regarding things like that as well. I mean, obviously we don't counsel them like we would a regular patient, but we do just give advice as if we were teachers or listen.
Okay.
Yeah, at Blue Ridge Community College, we're a rather small campus. We have a lot of students, but a lot of them are online. So the campus itself is small, and that's helpful because you can call somebody up across campus and say, "Hey, I'm sending this student over." But essentially, what we have available for our students going through crisis or mental health um, issues is kind of a one-stop student services center, and they ask to speak with a counselor or a mental health counselor of sorts. And we have a particular counselor that does typical kind of student counseling, like about careers and stuff like that. But she also is equipped to deal with crisis or mental health issues. And typically, there's a certain number of sessions that they'll be able to meet with that person for, and then there will be a referral plan, essentially. Who are we going to get you in touch with? What's your monetary situation like, your financial situation? Do you have insurance? How can we ensure that you continue to get what you need and overcome those kind of barriers? And how can we do that all while you still, try to achieve your educational goals here at the college? And then for employees, we have the Employee Assistance Network, which I, I I assume is offered at other colleges as well. And so it's essentially a building here in town where there are 6 or 7 counselors maybe, and you or anybody who lives under your roof, even if they're not related to you, I don't think. Um, you or anybody who's in your household can use those services, and I think they give you 6 or 8 sessions for free before they refer you, and essentially do the same thing that our student counselor does for students. Initially provide some help and then ensure that there's a follow-up plan.
Okay. Sharon, you wanted to say something about Foresight?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. And hi, Paulina. I'm happy to see that your sister could do this successfully. And she is a brave girl, really. I want to talk about our Forsyth Tech Community College, with this unprecedented COVID-19. Our school, start to do something called Forsyth Tech Cares, and it's also as a comprehensive approach to connect student and staff and faculty to the resource and support services they need, and also provide critical support by answering questions, connecting them to emergency financial assistance, and also make sure they are doing okay mentally and emotionally. And also I would like to say that they helped me. I went through some of, not depression, but because of my work and my graduation, and also I have 3 boys at home, it was a lot frustrated on me, and I reached to the point that I cannot do it. Like me, I'm all the time has a courage to do everything. But with this situation, I reached to the point that I cannot graduate, I cannot do my work, and I cry at night. I don't know how I can handle things. And thank God we have really a great supervisors. I would like to thank Ms. Kismet with that she reached to me and she said, we can, like me as a person, I don't reach other. Yeah, like I am independent all the time and I say I can solve this by myself. But sometimes even if you have a courage and you are a leader, sometimes you need help. Like sometimes you need help and it's okay to say I need help. So I reached to my advisor and she was phenomenal. Like she reached me to other people like in our at our college, and they arranged time that I can be out of my work until I graduate. So it will give a little bit time for me to be not stressed too much because of the work. And you know, even you are work at home, you have time to be there and you have to sit in front of the laptop and finish your hours. And there's a commitment even with your work, even you are at home. So this has helped me a lot. Like they arrange everything and even they pay me for even the 2 weeks that I've been out because of the situation also. And I feel like we as a student, especially the student, sometimes we don't know what is the resource we have at our college. All the community college has a lot of resource that as a leader we need. I reach also to other students that there is a resource that can help you, like they help me, you know, and you are not alone. Like I am just at home with my kids and that's it. No, you can reach, you can speak out for other people. And especially that they have also, if there is a phone number that we can call, it will help more. And really we have a phone number for our foresight take care teams. They can reach to the student and it will be within 48 hours. So I would like to say that our college tries to help students, but we as a student need to help ourselves, like reach to these resources and speak out. So like no one can hear someone silent, you know, until they see them or saw them. And we are at our home, like, and hopefully this pandemic will be end healthier for everyone and we can meet again in person. So I would like just to say that, like from my perspective, that it's solved for me. I finished my college successfully, and I will be graduate tomorrow virtually on YouTube, and it's good. Yeah, and even I send the link to my parents that they can share online from my country. And as you said before, all our instructors said that we can be connected online. Sometimes we are isolate ourselves, like even with our situation at home. But I would like to thank all these meetings help a lot. We stay connected. We get help from your presentation even. And we plan to do something with our project, college projects. It will be about this mental health. And we want to reach other students and connect with them and let them speak out. Like sometimes as a student, we will sit like a cafe online and talk, and they release their stress or as much as we can help. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Congratulations.
I know, I'm so happy. I can't wait to see the graduation pictures.
Thank you. We have it, but we keep it because we have virtual ones, so it will be good to be on virtual. Then we will share it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That way you can add like bunny ears to your head. And
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that on the major news, I don't know if anybody's heard, they're doing like a national graduation for high schoolers. Has anybody heard about that? And it's going to have a bunch of speakers, and I think it's highlighted by President Obama. And they're going to be like kind of like a national graduation for high schoolers that's going to be like on all the stations that they're going to for the high schoolers that are.
Is that the one that is it John Krasinski is?
I think so.
Coordinating or something.
Yes, I think it's that one. Yes. Yes.
I read something about it, but I didn't get a lot of details.
I think it's the 15th. I think it's the 15th of May or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be cool. I mean, you know, these times have forced us into doing things differently, right? And so we have to figure out what works. But back to a lot, I think, to what Sharon was talking about, especially is the connection. And Christina mentioned it as well, but it's that connection. You know, it's harder to make the connection, so we have to make the extra effort to get out there and do that. Anybody else have anything before we wrap this up? I don't want it to run too terribly long. We try to keep these sessions to an hour. And so we're pushing against that. But does anybody else have anything before we sign off?
House
I would
projects
like
are
to
great.
thank.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. House
Yeah.
projects are great. We're painting the house, so house projects are a great thing to do.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
for
you, everyone.
organizing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, the thanks goes to Paulina. It was her idea completely. And so we appreciate you reaching out and asking for this and
Thank you.
Thank you,
pulling it
Paulina.
all together.
Thanks,
And
Paulina.
so I think it's been great.
Thank you. I think my biggest inspiration for this has been my sister. You heard her story, and we had to live this with her, so I know how hard it can be.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
thankful. I think she's had to log off.
Yeah, she had to go to work. She asked me to
Yeah.
excuse her.
No, excellent.
And that's perfectly fine, but we do appreciate her coming on and sharing her story,
Yeah.
certainly.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then I think we can